Hello, teacher friends. Let's talk about giving students feedback on iTalki. So today I'm going to give you some tips on how and why you should give your students feedback on iTalki. And I'll talk about some situations where you don't need to and perhaps shouldn't even give feedback to your students. So stay tuned and let's get started. Why should you give feedback to your students on iTalki? Well, the first obvious reason is that it could help them understand what they need to improve on. The second reason is because usually when you're in class, especially when you're starting as a new teacher, you're working on budgeting time, managing your schedule, and just getting through some of the material. You might miss and forget to give your students certain pieces of feedback, and that's where written feedback comes in handy. We are teachers, we are regular people just like our students, and we have our own styles and our best ways of functioning and working. For you, you may be a better communicator through text than through speaking to a certain extent. So the fact that you have the option to give feedback after class could be very useful. The third and main reason, probably most important reason, why you should give feedback on iTalki is because it could help you get students and keep students. For example, after you give feedback on iTalki, your students may be prompted to actually give you feedback, you teacher feedback for the lesson. And when they give you feedback, that is like an advertisement for your profile. So other new students will see that feedback. They will see that review. So basically, by giving your students feedback, that could prompt them to give you feedback, and that can make you look better as a teacher. Another thing I have noticed for myself is that giving my students feedback from time to time could prompt them to book more lessons and to even renew packages. Yeah, so this brings me to when I actually give feedback on iTalki. Personally, I wish somebody told me this when I first got started. I gave probably too much feedback at the beginning. I was giving feedback and extensive feedback for every single class for probably the first 500, 600, or maybe even 1,000 lessons. And I was a big proponent of giving feedback. However, at a certain extent, you are going to become better at giving your students feedback, especially your long-term loyal students feedback in class, and even just students in general. And in such a case where it's not really necessary for you to give feedback in a written form afterwards. Besides, for me, I use Google Docs with my students, and that's where I leave all their feedback. Why should I have to put it on the iTalki platform as well, right? So basically after 600 or 700 lessons, I started to swindle off, and I stopped using it completely. I stopped giving my students feedback completely on the iTalki platform, only on Google Docs. However, then I realized that some of my students, it may give them a gentle reminder that I'm still here, that I still care, if I give them feedback on iTalki. Because, well, when you give your student feedback, a notification will go to their phone or to their email saying so, and that could remind them, oh, okay, I'm gonna go and book, I'm gonna stop dragging my heels, I'm gonna go book another package with Ryan, or I'm gonna book my first package with Ryan. I really enjoyed the trial lesson. So just recognize from your student's perspective, they leave the class, and some students could really be like, okay, what do I do now? But just by giving them that feedback, that little reminder, especially because of how unexpected it could be, that could be a nice little nudge to get them to actually book a course with you. And that's what leads to rebookings and long-term students. So my suggestion for you is at the beginning of your iTalki experience, leave a lot of feedback. That doesn't mean you have to leave 2 or 3 paragraphs, but it means that you should be leaving at least one sentence for each class. This could help you look professional for sure to your students. At the beginning of your iTalki journey, you will have to go above and beyond because teaching at a high quality online in one-to-one lessons, unless if you have done it before on a different platform, it may not come naturally to you. It may not be automatic. So by putting in these kinds of these extra mechanisms, it could ensure that you come off as a professional and therefore build a better reputation as a professional teacher or a community tutor. So definitely make sure that you are leaving feedback for almost every lesson with your students until you get a few hundred lessons in. And then I suggest that you begin only giving feedback to your students maybe once every 5 lessons or 10 lessons. And if you're giving them feedback elsewhere, like extensive feedback in class, especially written feedback, then don't worry about it at all. But I do emphasize that for some students, written feedback is very important. So even if you give them oral feedback in class and you tell them what they need to work on, that might not sink in. So it is very important that you're at least throwing it down in the chat box, what you expect from them and how you think they could improve. And I am almost 3,000 lessons in, and right now I only give feedback pretty much to new students, and that's mainly just to, again, give them a nudge, let them know, hey, I'm ready when you are to start a course. Go ahead and book the first package, right? So that's my strategy right now. Now, how do I give feedback? Let me show you. So the first thing that we're going to do is go to my iTalki profile. We'll head on down to the completed lessons and we'll go over to Kate's lesson right here. This is one of the most recent lessons I've taught just this morning. So for Kate, she has confirmed that the lesson is completed, which means I'm now allowed to leave feedback, and she can leave feedback from me. All I have to do is click leave feedback. I could go right here, please leave feedback for the student, and I could begin typing. So the first thing I would want to do is to go to Kate's Google Doc down here. I could scroll down to the bottom, and as you see, this is some information, some corrections I have made for Kate in today's conversational lesson. Things like to take breaks instead of to make pauses. The most popular holiday, no less than. So this might be difficult for you to understand, but I remember what the mistakes were. Otherwise, I would just write here the correction. So for example, I remember instead of to take breaks would be not, or instead of to make pauses. Yeah, so this is all the vocabulary corrections right here, grammar corrections there. And in terms of pronunciation, it's fantastic. So typically I would leave positive feedback here, constructive criticism here, and some recommendations for next time. But really, in this lesson, I decided not to do that because the flow of the conversation which was just so good, and she is a very high level student. So let's imagine that, just like some students, I would be giving her feedback on iTalki. How do we do it? Well, the first thing we need to start off with is positive feedback, okay? Start with positive feedback. Whether it doesn't matter if you're speaking or if you're talking, start positive, okay? So for example, I could say, as always, a fantastic chat with you, Kate. Okay, so now I could talk about her fluency. Your fluency is developing nicely along with your extensive grammatical and lexical range. Okay, now I could talk about some constructive criticism. So some language I like to use with constructive criticism, I like to keep things positive, okay? So I would say something like continue improving or continue working on your pronunciation and word choice. Yeah. Perhaps I could give her a recommendation. You could profit from finding, practicing collocations online. Well done, and see you next time. The little smiley face. Happy days. Now, this is not something, as I said, this is not something that I would do for every single student after every single class. Maybe I would do this after, you know, every 5 lessons or 10 lessons or something like that, right? But this is just an example right here of some feedback that you could give to a student. All right, and there you have it, teachers. So whether it be oral feedback or written feedback, the formula that I tend to go for is positive feedback, so say something nice, constructive criticism, recommendation. Yeah, if you ever give your students a piece of criticism, you have to be prepared to back it up with a recommendation, because if they are in front of you, the next question is going to be, how do I improve that? So if you expect them to do their job as a student and to improve, for example, their use of the past simple versus the present perfect, or their use of regular versus irregular verbs, you need to be prepared to give them a strategy or a worksheet or an exercise or something to be able to help them to improve this capacity, okay? And as always, if you have any questions regarding how to give recommendations, how to provide feedback, or anything else teaching or iTalki related, that's what I'm here for. That's what the community is here for. So please reach out, throw a comment down in the box below, and consider subscribing for more tips and tricks. I'd be happy to help. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep smiling.